Trying to make your own music is hard enough without a plethora of crazy vocabulary going on. So today I want to take some of the more misunderstood, beginner-friendly vocab words that maybe you've heard before, maybe didn't totally understand, and just try to demystify some of these just because it'll help you, so you can stop pretending that you know when you're talking about something when somebody's like, oh, I'm recording at 48K, what do you record at? And you're just like, yeah, me too, because I like 48K, whatever. We're gonna talk about all this, right? So let's break it down. Let's start with sample rate. So sample rate is basically, you've probably even heard descriptions. It's like, how detailed of a picture do you want? Like 48K, 48,000 samples per second. You can think of these as screenshots of the sound that are being taken, right? So like, the higher the sample rate, the more information is gonna be in that sound, okay? We can talk about it day and night and talk about the differences between, 48 and 192 and 44.1. But what do you actually need to know, okay? What should I record at? Record at 48K if you're starting out. Some people will be like, oh, beginners start at 44.1 because that's like what a CD quality is. Guys, CD quality? Are we serious? No, record at 48K because that's what video stuff is like meant to sync to, right? Your iPhone camera app is recording samples at 48K. So that's kind of the universal standard. If you want to shoot a music video or something like that, it'll sync to 48K flawlessly. Record at 48K. Unless you're doing something way different, but for most people, 48K is kind of where it's going to be at. Now that doesn't mean that you can't, if you've already recorded something at 44.1, you can put it into a project file and it will convert it to 48K if the project is like that. Usually it kind of asks you if you want to do something like that, but basically 99% of the producers that I know and work with, they record at 48K. So it just kind of saves you the hassle because you can also drop something into a project and then forget to convert it. And then it'll actually lose sync over time, right? Or sometimes it'll convert it and speed stuff up. This weird stuff happens once you start dealing with mismatched sample rates, even though the digital audio workstations are supposed to fix it or putting it in Final Cut is supposed to fix it. Record at 48K. That's all you really need to know. If you want to check real quick, this is just a Logic thing. If you just go to File and then Project Settings, usually this will be a project setting and not like a global setting in most DAWs. Audio, right here, you can kind of see, boom. This one is at 48K, right? Now I can switch it to whatever. 192 is pretty interesting. Usually your interface is gonna be the thing that's responsible for how high you can go. I will say one time when I first got my Apogee interface, it could go up to 192 and I recorded some stuff on there and it was like the best, most real sounding thing. I felt like I was in the room listening to it, but also that's just gonna get converted down to kind of any type of media that you end up delivering anyways, but it's kind of cool. Just check it out if you wanna just take a listen to it. I want to talk a little bit about gain versus output versus headroom, okay? So gain is going to be the level of your input signal, whatever you're putting in to basically anything, right? So like if you plug a microphone cable or just like a regular mic into your interface, you want to set your gain right. So it's about, a good level, a healthy level going into a preamp in your interface, into a compressor or whatever. Now this actually makes a really big difference, right? Because you want to have enough gain going in that you're not clipping it, you're not going too much. Usually you can just tell visually by a waveform, which you will get into trouble because there's a lot of gain stages that happen sometimes along the way. But you want a healthy enough signal. Again, gain is not the volume overall of what you're dealing with. It's the amount of input signal going into whatever you're sending it into. Now again, that could be a preamp, right? Like for me, I use an Apollo interface. So my microphones are usually set up to this right here. So I can adjust how much signal I'm sending into, and then I just go direct into Logic for that. And then I can adjust my output from there. Now there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Then I have like a plug-in compressor going into that, right? So really be aware of those things. I see so many people, just like when they're mixing something or they're doing whatever with vocals, they'll be like, all right, so here's my vocal. I just want it louder. Boom, there it is. Got it. Boom. There it is. No, don't do that. Right? That's your output fader for sure. But also these things will have a different effect on how hard you hit a compressor, something like that. And we'll talk more about it in a second. But just be understanding that gain is different than volume, right? And there are different stages of gain as you go along through the chain of preamp, plugins, buses, etc., stuff like that, right? Now, headroom is how much room you have from the top of your signal, the loudest it gets, to the ceiling, or maybe it'll start distorting, right? So for instance, if I just play this track real quick. So you can see this right here will tell me how much headroom I have. So at its peak, it's minus 6.7, okay? I feel like that's like a pretty healthy amount of headroom. This matters when you start adding an entire mix in. It definitely matters if you ever send your stuff out to get mastered by a mastering engineer, because if you send a mastering or mixing person stuff where it's just kind of like dimed out and there's no headroom, their hands are tied with how much they can do. The more headroom you deliver a project at, generally the more options they'll have to do their job, right? So again, this all comes from just, making sure that all your, faders and stuff are set where you want them to be to get a good demo mix, which is just what this, very, very small project is. But it's important to leave headroom at the end. And if you want to hear something louder, sometimes maybe just turn your monitors up when you're mixing instead of just trying to get all the tracks clipping and stuff like that. So again, gain staging and then leaving enough headroom for it not to spoil how you're listening to it is very important stuff that, you have to go through an incredible amount of trial and error just to understand. Clipping is another one. Distortion from recording too loud will have something clip, right? Like you can kind of see this waveform right here. Now, if it were, super big, you could see the top and the bottom of it getting clipped off at the top and bottom, like I said, right? So this is a pretty healthily recorded track, but now I could get this to clip like this. I can digitally clip it. Maybe the source was recorded correctly, but if I put the fader up and beyond where it should be, unity gain like it's 0, then I can actually make it clip and introduce those unpleasant, distortion sounds digitally, even if my source audio is good. So that's why, again, gain staging is super important, probably more important than you even realize, but it's something you gotta spend time on. Let's take a quick second to talk about different types of microphones. All right, you may have already heard that there's, a difference between dynamic and condenser microphones. School of thought is dynamic is better for live, condenser is more sensitive, better for recording. You can get away with both in either or situation. I've used condensers live before. I've used, dynamics all the time recording. But basically the main difference is how you utilize those microphones to get the input in, right? A condenser will usually require 48 volts of phantom power. Most interfaces have that built into the preamp section of the interface you can just turn on. Usually it's like a switch. Maybe it's on the interface itself. Maybe it's in the software that controls the interface in the DAW. But yeah, 48 volt is just something that gives power to a condenser microphone most of the time. Dynamic mics don't need that. Usually, now things are kind of fail-safe enough where you can have 48 volt phantom power on and it's not going to affect a dynamic microphone. There used to be this whole thing. It's like, I'm going to fry my ribbon microphone, which with ribbons is still it's another type of microphone that you're probably not going to have to worry about right now. Just look that up if you want more information on ribbon microphones and active versus passive ribbon microphones. But usually having a phantom power on isn't going to hurt a dynamic microphone or a condenser microphone, but it's something that you should know why you're using it, right? Now, the pickup pattern on a microphone is also something that's very important, right? So a lot of higher end microphones, or maybe, and really these are coming down in price so drastically. In fact, I just did a video on my channel last week about the new 80K mic, which is in Munich. It has 3 polar patterns. So it has a cardioid, an omni, and a figure 8 polar pattern selector switch right on the mic that you can switch to. Generally, I would say most of the time using this, you want a cardioid pattern, which means it's picking up stuff like mostly in front of the microphone and really not anything behind it. Omni means it's picking up all directions, right? So some different examples of context when you might want to use that. If you're miking a room and there are multiple instruments in it, like let's say you have to record, a guitar player and a singer and a drummer, you have to position the room correctly to pick it up with one mic, right? So that's when you can kind of start experimenting with how far you want your singer away from the mic, getting some percussion way, way back, and then just kind of dialing in almost like a live mix with distance, right? Also, an Omni mic can be a cool drum room mic because it's picking up like the sound of like the reflections and stuff. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't want that. And then figure eight is just what you kind of think it is. It's like you got each side. So you can maybe have a guitar player on one side and a singer on the other side, which sometimes you can get a much better sound if you're doing a live thing, setting up that way, instead of having the singer and the guitar player on the same side of the microphone, just because then you really kind of dial in two sonic frequencies kind of hitting it at the same time. A lot of times it's easier to get a little bit more separation if you have it on either side of the microphone in figure eight, which is just kind of something that I've experienced myself. Dynamic microphones are great. Shure SM57 is like the classic example of a dynamic mic. You can just like really pump a lot of gain into that, and you can capture super loud signals and it won't distort. So perfect stage mic. A de-esser, okay? I'm not gonna get too far into compression. Let me know if you want a separate video on just some of these things, but a de-esser is something I talked about in the last video on the Fader channel, and basically it's a compressor just for the S's. There are certain problematic frequencies that pop up in a lot of different vocals that sound harsh or unpleasant, and a de-esser is one that is a compressor just for a certain part of it. And that could bring you into talking about a multi-band compressor. Great way to talk about just a multi-band compressor is instead of compressing a full signal, it'll break that signal up into like different bands, like low, mid, high. You can get really, really crazy with multi-band compressors now these days. But like let's say you have like a boomy, muddy acoustic guitar sound. Maybe you want to bring down just the lows but keep the highs there. You can multi-band it and compress the lows, and it's going to leave the high frequencies alone. Stems versus tracks. This is something I hear a lot. So I always think of stems as being certain parts of a track. So like, let's say I have a full mix. I have vocals, drums, guitar, bass, right? So if I were to stem that out, I would want 4 stereo stems, right? The drums would be its own thing. The guitar would be its own thing. The vocals would be its own thing. And the bass to be its own thing. But also, a drum track, like a properly recorded drum kit, could be like 12 tracks, 12 mics in general, right? So if you were to stem that out, in my mind, you would get a stereo file of the drums, but some people think that stems are every single individual track, in which case you'd have 12 stems for a drum kit. This just differs depending on who you're talking to. But some people use stems to be like, all right, every track is a stem. So again, this demo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can say there are 6 stems here. I would say these are 6 tracks that I could export into maybe 4 stems. Fader's a great example of a platform that does this really well, all right? So I just dragged a song into Fader, and you can stem out the individual components of this, right? So this is just a song we were working on this week. I threw an entire stereo file in here, and it stemmed out the drums. And again, this is giving me one file for the drums, one file for the melodic instruments, and then a file for the vocals, right? The amazing thing about this is it gives you the chords in real time as they're changing, which is like such a cool thing, especially when it comes to me trying to remember how to play my own songs. You'll be like, it's C major now, back to G major. It does such a good job of that. That's crazy. So yeah, definitely check out Fader because it does a great job of letting you download stems. And what I think of is the traditional way to do it, but it also lets you do premium stem types if you get the Plus subscription. So yeah, something that you really want to be understanding of, especially if you're working with any kind of samples. Stemming stuff out is going to be your best friend, and Fader is going to be an incredible resource to you from there. So that's just kind of like a quick, 15 minutes talk about some stuff that you're going to need to know. Let me know if you want me to get simpler with some of these descriptions, if you want me to get more detailed in these descriptions. If you have any comments or questions, let me know in the comments of stuff that you would like explained maybe more, more in detail, because I would love to kind of help you guys understand some of these things, because there's so much to know when you first start out that it can be helpful just taking time to explain just the vocabulary so you can speak the language and maybe communicate more confidently with other musicians and producers. Thanks for watching.